Good afternoon. I wanted to share with you this afternoon as we approach Shabbat some words about the weekly Torah portion. Actually, portions, as this week we read from Tazria and Metzora, two Torah portions in Leviticus that are often paired in our Torah reading cycle. These Torah portions, Tazria and Metzora, are the portions, frankly, that, well, no rabbi wants to speak on, or very few. For years, some congregations in our Reform movement even avoided Tazria and Metzora completely. 25 years ago, amazing, right? 25 years ago when I was ordained and came to my first pulpit, I found that B'nai Mitzvah students weren't even assigned this Torah portion, but were instead given one of the portions that included the Ten Commandments. Why, you might ask? Why skip entire Torah portions? Well, Tazria and Metzora are about impurity, blood, illness, childbirth, menstruation, and other bodily discharges, rashes, mold in the houses, basically all sorts of stuff that makes folks uncomfortable. The things that most kids and probably many adults would go, ooh, gross. That's disgusting. And so, for some, these Torah portions were to be avoided. It was easier. This was a kind of unofficial change to the Torah reading calendar that was done in some congregations. The truth is, our Reform movement has a history of making more official changes to the Torah and half-Torah portions. This was not an official one, as it were. For example, on Yom Kippur morning, as you and our NSCI community know, we read from the Torah portion Nitzavim, which talks about our ancestors collectively affirming the covenant made at Sinai as they're about to enter the Promised Land. It says, Atem Nitzavim Hayom, Kolchem, Lifnei Adonai Elohechem. All of you stand here today before God, before the Lord your God. And Yom Kippur afternoon, we read Kedoshim. We read the Torah portion that actually we will read next week in our Torah reading cycle as well, that talks about being holy and gives us a whole to-do list for being holy. We know the things on that list. Honor your parents. Observe the holidays. Take care of those who are poor and disenfranchised in our community. Observe holidays and practice honest business ethics. Those are Torah portions that are not on the traditional calendar, but those that our Reform movement has changed over the years for purposes of theology. I don't think Tazria Metzora was one of those official changes, and it's not really about theology. I think it was about discomfort. But this year, look at that. Here we are amidst a pandemic in our country, and we come to these Torah portions with new eyes. The Torah portion talks about illness, laundry, purification, quarantine, washing with water. Wait, this sounds familiar. Sounds like the 4 million news articles, community briefings, television broadcasts, emails, you name it, that we've read just today. Suddenly, Torah has even more new meaning. And some of the toughest chapters some of the chapters that have been some of the toughest to bring to our lives suddenly speak with a newly fresh and timely voice. Further, in past years, we might have read this week's Torah portions with even more discomfort for another reason. Well, we see in them instructions to send those with particular ailments away from what was called then the camp, for our purposes out of the community until that person is presumed to be well or proven to be well. What? Send someone who's sick away? Don't go near them? Why would we do that? Why would we send someone into isolation? Today, those words ring somewhat to very differently. How many of us have walked down the street or through the grocery store and wondered if the person right next to us or in front of us might be ill? How many of us have, and be honest, you can say it silently, but how many of us have wondered if our friends or neighbors were taking the threat as seriously as we were? How much judgment have we heard toward us? Or how much have we directed at others when our behavior or their behavior looked wrong or not meeting the standard or following the rules? These words of Torah echo differently now. Words about isolation, well, they echo differently as we're scared. We're scared of becoming ill, even if we don't like those words and we don't like ourselves when we offer judgment. We certainly don't like being judged. There is, though, another side of that isolation, another one that makes us maybe not uncomfortable, but certainly terribly sad. It's heartbreaking. A challenge that hits home, so close to home right now. How many of us have family who are isolated, either because of their own illness or because of illness in their residential communities, or because we don't want to take risks of making them ill, so we stay away from them to keep them healthy? How sad and worried are we as we think of our dear ones, our elders, those who are ill, those who we can't be with, and those whose immune systems are weakened, so we don't want to risk being near. So yes, Tazria and Metzora have found new relevance this year, unfortunately. Oh, I wish they hadn't. I wish I could come to this week's Torah portions and say, oh no, I have to write about Tazria and Metzora. I wish that the world was so healthy and we weren't stuck at home and I could just complain about these Torah portions to my colleagues, to my kids. But there is, though, well, there are many lessons, but there is certainly one lesson I'd like to leave you with today. A most powerful lesson for the ages, whatever our times, good or bad. It comes from the interpretation of the word Metzora. That is one who has this skin ailment, often referred to as leprosy. You see, our sages were of the opinion, as one scholar wrote, that leprosy is inflicted as a punishment for the sin of slander, or lashon hara. And this idea is expressed throughout the Talmudic period, throughout the words of different scholars of different eras. The word Metzora is a sort of play on words or a contradiction for the Hebrew expression motzi shem ra, or slander. So in the rabbinic imagination, leprosy and slander are linked. In other words, our sages taught that there was physical illness given as punishment for speaking badly about another person. The most oft-cited example is Moses' sister Miriam, who some of you have read about over the years. Miriam speaks badly about Moses and his wife, and suddenly she finds herself with a white, scaly affliction. In response to that, by the way, Moses calls out, El na refana la, oh God, please heal her. Our first prayer of healing spoken aloud. So even if we don't believe that physical illness is a consequence of lashon hara, and I don't, our tradition has much to teach us. Jewish teachings point to a whole list of negative expressions of speech that leprosy is a punishment for. On that list are slander, bearing false witness, desecrating God's name, creating hostility among siblings, speaking untruths about a friend, rudeness, and untrue speech. Now listen to that list one more time and think about it. How many of us are guilty of even one thing on that list? A list that includes slander, bearing false witness, desecrating God's name, creating hostility among siblings, speaking untruths about a friend, rudeness, and untrue speech. Chances are we're all there somewhere. Leprosy aside, that list is a reminder of the power and the danger of our words. Judaism is clear that we are not to speak badly about another person, even if it's true. Think about that. You know it's factually accurate. You know that this is true. You can't say it. The only exception to doing so might be if we want to offer that information to someone who could help the subject of the information. But first, we have to do a really good self-check of our intent. Why am I repeating this information? Is it for my own ego or personal glory, or is it really to be helpful? Ultimately, the message is clear. We're really not to say anything about another person that might impact them badly, might have someone else think badly about them. That is anything that's true, and certainly we care not to say anything that is untrue. This is tough. Certainly the true parts. Hopefully we're not repeating the untrue. But it's a reality check, and a good one. As Rabbi Jonathan Sachs points out, and I quote, "The entire issue of speech and its impact on people has become massively amplified by the spread of smartphones and social media and their impact on the entire tone of the public conversation. Rarely have the rules of Lashon Hara, that is gossip or bad, evil speech, rarely have the rules of Lashon Hara been more timely or necessary." Sachs continues, "I believe we need the laws of Lashon Hara now more than ever before. Social media is awash with hate. The language of politics has become ad hominem and vile. We seem to have forgotten the messages that Tazria and Metzora teach. That is, that evil speech is a plague. It destroys relationships, rides roughshod over people's feelings, debases the public square, turns politics into a jousting match between competing egos, and defiles all that is sacred about our common life. It need not be like this." So while today we are living amidst this pandemic that is a physical illness, let us think about the plague of Lashon Hara. We know as we shelter in place that tempers are short, fingers are often pointed, and patience is at a premium for all of us. To that end, I leave you with one of my favorite midrashim, or rabbinic stories. And I tell it to you not just because my grandma Ruth was a really good cook and made a great tongue. Nearly 2 millennia ago, we had a great Jewish sage and leader, Rabbi Gamliel. Midrash teaches that Rabbi Gamliel prepared a meal for his students. He brought before them 2 pieces of tongue, one that was tender and one that was tough. They began choosing the tender tongue, wouldn't you? The meat that was easy to chew. They set aside the tough. He said to them, "Look at what you're choosing. For just as you are choosing the tender and setting aside the tough, so should your own tongues be soft to one another. So to us." And you don't have to eat tongue if you don't like it. But how we choose to use our tongues, that is the power we have. Do we utter words that are tough and damaging, or words that are soft and kind? May we this Shabbat and in the days to come, may we utter words at home and words out in the world from our homes, words that are tender, words of kindness, patience, compassion, and peace. Shabbat Shalom.